Uh, Ladies and gentlemen, friends, foes, whoever, you need to learn this information. I'm super excited. As usual, I get to hang out with a Sudo superstar accountant
Voodoo.
slash Sudo. I don't know what Sudo means, like somewhat super duper star of accounting slash really true entrepreneur, know how to analyze. A lot of people may not remember the last episode where you used to own a retail establishment, which is really cool. And I was going to tell you this before we got started, that where I had lunch just a little while ago, if you look on the podcast, I mean, on my where I checked in at, I met with the owner of this store, and trying to start more businesses, create more businesses, invest in businesses, build businesses with other business owners, especially other entrepreneurs. And this entrepreneur, I'll get him on the radio show, which is incredible. He started this business and he's opened a second store, and I see his success. I see his brand, and I think I can contribute somewhere, somehow. And so the topic today, if you don't mind, this is not the best topic in the world, but it can be the most rewarding: employees. Because you need to duplicate yourself. You can't do everything. It's impossible to scale staff, employees, contractors, however you want to label this person. There is some accounting issues with this, legality issues with this. So I'd rather have you explain the details of employees. We could talk about some banter when we first started our accounting firm, where I was like, no employees, like, and you got really frustrated with me for about 2 seconds, and then I relented, because you can't run a business properly if you start trying to manipulate the law for your benefit. So let's go into, and then we'll go into when should I hire an employee and all that other fun stuff. But let's talk about employees. What's your take on employees? When should I hire an employee? What comes to your mind with the word employee?
Well, like you said, duplicating yourself. Yeah, when you're at capacity and you realize, like, when you really truly realize where your time is best spent, that's probably when you need to be looking at making a move towards an employee.
But when do you jump to that point where, like, you have a successful business, it's based on contractors, but when do you draw the line and say, okay, is it when I want to control this person? I mean, is there
Well, that's where you get into the legalities of it, and we could jump right in. But this contractors, they set their own schedule, and there's a whole list of things that the state looks at of what determines a contractor or employee. But one of them is, setting your own schedule. Do they already know how to do the job? Like, do they already have the skills to do that job? Are you providing them with equipment to do that job? Are you telling them when to show up? There's
when you mean by providing the tools, could that be a cell phone?
Yeah.
Okay.
If they need it for the job.
This is not the most fun subject for me, so let's just
I
get
feel
down.
like no, you're making it not fun.
Let's just get down and dirty. The one time, I don't know if you remember this, a couple of years ago, I got a letter from unemployment. Yeah. And I was very upset to the degree of about to go crazy. Mm-hmm. And just so you know, ladies and gents, I'm not a super fan of employees. I love employees only if the business really functions with that employee. But let me tell you,
a lot of it depends on the industry. Like the accounting firm, absolutely, we have employees
because we're telling them what to do.
Well, and that's the nature of that industry. Like the skill set of people that we are attracting and hiring, they are employees.
Okay. So let me give you this one example. So I was running a real estate company, construction company, and someone asked me for a job, and I love people. And so I was like, listen, I need you to go sweep these houses after the construction job. So the guy, he actually had a BMW. He wanted $10 an hour. He had his own tools. He had a broom and a shovel and a back of his little BMW. I'm not joking. Now, I can't believe this guy was driving a BMW, but that's for another episode. But so he gets the job and he does a terrible job. Seriously. Like, he goes to the job where, like, hey, go to this address and sweep this, and whenever it's convenient for you. When I did my pre-hiring, I verified that he was a contractor. Did he have a business card? Check. Does he have his own transportation? Check. He had his own shovel and broom. Check, check, check. He wanted a job. No big deal. I'm thinking to myself, as an entrepreneur, I'm protected here. I'm just giving him an address. You go clean it. Well, anyway, the guy does a terrible job. He quits or something, or we fire him. I'm not really sure how it goes down, but obviously he wasn't good. Next thing you know, I get a letter from the government stating that I laid him off. I have to pay unemployment. I was extremely irate. I actually have it documented where he signed my contractor form, which we can get that in on our membership / group coming up soon. But I have a very detailed check the box. You are a contractor. You have your own bank account. You have your own EIN number. Let's be clear. You are a contractor, but I still got hammered and I had to pay a fine of $200 and something. What went wrong there? Now,
okay, first of all, so I'm assuming since you had him sign your contractor contract, you also got a W-9.
I don't remember, but probably.
Yeah, so that's one of the first things I always say is before you pay anybody, this is rule number one, get a W-9. That outlines, or that has them sign off, this is my social security number and this is my address. The next thing would be, and sometimes I see that this letter pop up a lot, not a lot, but it does pop up. And that's usually what opens up a can of worms too, is the state says, this person saying, oh, I want to go file unemployment. I got fired or I got laid off, or well, then the state says, well, I don't have any record of this employee.
Right.
And that's the letter that you got.
But now, then I tried to give them the paperwork. I tried to explain to them they just stiff-armed me and said, no, this is how it is.
Well, it doesn't always work like that. You kind of, sometimes with the state and any government agencies, you kind of have to be the squeaky wheel. I mean, if he signed a W-9 and you have that agreement, it sounds to me like he was a contractor.
Right.
Now there are cases that do come up where it sparks a unemployment law issue, where they want to do a labor audit. So that happens where now they're asking for all your payroll records, your contractor records, to say, okay, are these people truly contractors? Because you're paying them as contractors, but then they'll go so far as to say, okay, well, do you have copies of their general liability insurance? Do you have copies of their business cards? Are they operating as a business?
Right.
And that's where people really get stung.
And I think that's the nature of this podcast today, is to really outline, Rose, if you can, the nuances of having an employee versus a contractor, right? That's our title of our podcast. Yeah. And you just hit on something that's extremely powerful. That could trigger you into a massive labor dispute, which you would have to convert all those general contractors or contractors to employees and pay back all that tax, or,
it's the unemployment
tax, but also workman's comp as well. If in my world, that's why I don't like employees. Just
okay. Well, there's right and wrong ways to do things. So with the contractors, and the reason I thought this would be good for this podcast is because we deal with a lot of real estate investors, and in that industry, we are dealing with a lot of contractors. And these are true contractors. So like I mentioned previously, get a W-9. I made this mistake myself last year. I was doing a rehab and I did not take my own advice and get a W-9 before I paid the dude. Sometimes that's the hardest thing to grasp, because, you got a lot of different wheels turning. You got things going on with your project and you just don't think about it. But I'm never going to talk to that person ever again. I'm not going to ever get their information. And so that makes it a challenge when issuing them a 1099 at the end of the year.
So why don't you explain what a W-9 does and how it helps you as an investor or a payer person?
A W-9 is just a document that they have to fill out, they are, and their social security number. That form does not get filed with the IRS. It's for your records. At the end of the year, you are supposed to be issuing 1099s to your contractors, to your attorneys, to anyone that you pay rent to. So there's a lot of nuances with that if it's more than $600. Now, a lot of accountants and even IRS auditors will say that if you don't issue 1099s, and that cost is not deductible. That's not necessarily true. It's just a heck of a lot harder to prove that cost if you do not issue a 1099.
Okay, hold up. Wait a minute. Hit the brakes. You said that you have to, first paying rent. So you're talking about the landlord should give, walk me through that. You just said that.
So like, if I pay someone rent for my office, I should be sending the landlord a 1099.
So they record it properly. It's just it's integrity issue, right?
Yeah, and so like our clients that collect rent income, they get a lot of 1099s at the end of the year and it's in box 1, it says rent income. There's also another box that says attorney fees. There's a box that says, I think it says non-employee compensation. So those are the 3 main boxes on that 1099 form. The other question that I often get is, do we have to issue 1099s for people that we pay using Cash App or PayPal or anything like that? The answer is no, you don't, because that third party is responsible for sending out those 1099s. But that's probably not an ideal way to pay your people.
I just got excited.
No, because
I just got excited.
And here's why. What name is your PayPal account in?
Me personally, but I can open
right. So we don't want that.
Send me the money.
The other thing to stop doing is pulling cash out of your ATM to pay your contractors.
That's ludicrous.
That's a surefire way to, okay, now you definitely can't do a 1099. You're not gonna be able to prove it at an audit, and it's gonna make your accountant go crazy.
Well, can you prove it with the withdrawal receipt from the ATM machine?
But that doesn't tell you anything.
Right.
It tells you took cash out.
It's interesting on the Cash App. I didn't realize that you could do it that way. Maybe for like day labor or short-term scenario, or not at all.
Yeah, we want to try to get all those deductions that we can. So, do a check, or if they send you an invoice electronically, that way it goes to your bank. That's ideal, but not cash.
All right. Let's get back to this employee versus contractor. How does someone protect themselves? And is there a way not to pay unemployment or Social Security? I mean, these are, 7.5% tax on top of what the poor.
And this is when I start to say, okay, well, welcome to the big boy club. People talk like, oh, well, we're hiring. Are you hiring an employee or a contractor? If you're hiring contractors, quit calling them employees, quit calling them payroll, quit saying they're on salary. These are all employment terms.
Right. Can you run that contractor through your payroll as a 1099?
I mean, no. If it's an employee, then they get paid, pay stubs that break out their gross pay and their taxes.
The Social Security.
Yeah, the Social Security, Medicare. You also have to set up your withholding accounts depending on your state. So like we're in Oklahoma, so we have withholding accounts for those states. We also, like me personally, I have employees out of state, so I have to set up withholding accounts for those other states.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So if you have a staff member in, say, Atlanta, you have to open up an account just to hold their withholding in that account. So it's another bank account that you have to manage.
Not a bank account. So when I say withholding account, that's with their state agency.
Okay.
So in Oklahoma, we have Oklahoma Tax Commission.
So you're telling me if I have to pay somebody X amount of money and then they're withholding, I send it to that account too, and they basically escrow their money for them.
Yeah.
As a state staff. And if they qualify to receive that money back with deductions, if not, they keep this state.
Exactly.
income.
And that's just for them to file on their personal tax returns. Any withholding is their money.
Sure.
It's just prepaying their tax.
And like in Texas, they don't pay
right.
income
Texas
tax.
doesn't have withholding. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And that's why every state is different. Like I'm not an HR expert, but I do know about payroll taxes. Get it. You definitely need an EIN, which if you're in business, you probably already have one, but EIN stands for Employer Identification Number. Workers' comp insurance is a big one. It's not that expensive depending on your industry. Again, setting up a payroll system. So that's either using a third-party payroll or your accountant if they offer payroll. That way, I mean, there are ways to do payroll manually, but if you don't know what you're doing with payroll, it's just so much easier to outsource it.
So what's the total cost? I'm a small real estate investor. I'm up to 40 units and I want to hire people to run my property management for me. I'm tired. I'm burned out. What cost? So right now you're telling me I have a software cost or an accounting cost, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to do payroll, which is their Social Security and Medicare.
Yeah. You're going to match it. Yeah.
Right.
So usually what I just rough and dirty estimate is I say that is going to cost you 10% of their pay.
So if I'm going to pay them $15 an hour, I have to allocate $16, $17.
17. Yeah.
Right.
Or 20. Yeah. And that covers your employer portion of their Social Security and Medicare. And it also covers some of their unemployment if your state has that, and workers' comp. So that's just a quick estimate. And then of course you're going to, like you said, you're going to have administrative costs if you're not doing your own payroll. There are sometimes monthly returns you have to file, definitely quarterly returns you have to file, and then year end. So
per employee.
Yeah. Well, no, for
your company? For
the company. Yeah. So I get why a lot of people are anti-payroll, but really it's, you know, if you have people on staff that are, that at least think they're employees, you're not doing them any favors by not paying them.
Is there a liability? I've hired a few people in my lifetime. Some people are very adamant. I don't want to be a W-2 employee, and I understand that verbiage and that language and that work ethic. Mm-hmm. And then there's some people that just want to be an employee. What's the nuances? Is one greater than the other? It's just more work as a regular employee. I think,
someone that is, if they just get contract work, they themselves need to be diligent about setting aside their self-employment tax. That's just as much as the employer tax. So, I mean, that's 15.3% on self-employment tax.
So you're very comfortable with this subject, and I'm shaking in my boots over here because I guess maybe because I'm not a detailed person, and there just seems like there's so many steps to doing this. Okay, so I got to make sure I got them the W-2 form filled out. Then I have to set up a separate account for this individual. Then I have to pay monthly or quarterly or weekly their contribution that I have to match per se. Then they have to get a payroll stub. Then if I do this at all wrong, I can have jail time.
No, not jail. Well, I mean,
but I mean, I've heard horror stories like, somebody didn't.
That's one of the things is the IRS is very unforgiving with payroll tax. Like if you miss your payroll tax deposits or you underpay, you overpay, you're going to get a letter very quickly. I've had clients that they withheld pay. This has happened. You hear about this. They withheld the taxes from their employees and they didn't remit it. That's a big deal. So that's basically you're stealing from your employees.
Which you can technically get shut down. It's almost like it's tax evasion, right? I mean, absolutely. In a nutshell.
Yeah. And that's where it comes into play. Like you have to be managing your cash flow too, because you're holding those funds in escrow and then you're paying them to the state or to the feds monthly or quarterly, depending on the amount.
Well, me personally, it's just like taking someone's deposit. It's their money. Mm-hmm. and I'm required by fiduciary to give an account for this money that is rightfully theirs. This is just in case they do damage.
Right. But it's not, it's really not, once you get on a good system, it's not that big of a deal. It's just,
well, I just think a lot of people don't know this. And I know for me, starting as a young entrepreneur, I didn't think I could afford it. Two, I didn't want to learn something new that really didn't benefit me. This is more of a governmental control. And it was just me so elusive, just, okay, hey, you're 1099. Do you do this for other investors? And I just write one check. It's just so attractive just to do it that way. But there is a gray line. What is that line that people tend to step over that you've seen? And most of the people that listen here are real estate investors and some entrepreneurs, but is there like you can't cross this line, we know for sure this is wrong?
I mean, definitely paying under the table is wrong.
Yeah. Well, what does that mean exactly? Like if I got $200, say, man, cut my grass, here's $200.
Meaning, here's a good example. A tenant gives you $300 cash for their rent, and you take that $300 and pay a contractor.
It's never recorded.
Never recorded. And that's, that's not ideal.
That's not ideal. Well, my mind starts spinning. I'm like, that's a really good idea, Rose. Like, I was like, and then my mind was like, who monitors your books? I mean, think about it logically. Like there's still old school tenants landlords out there that only do cash only. And does the government know what they're recording? That's where you started out with. You as a tenant should serve that landlord a 1099.
Well, no. Not the tenant, because they're not paying you rent for a business.
Oh, it's only for businesses.
It's for business. Like I pay rent. So that's because I'm deducting that rent as an expense. That's a business. But like if you get Section 8 payments, you get 1099s from Section 8 for all that rent.
Absolutely.
I just think that, do things the right way, because sometimes that can come up and bite you. You may have a great relationship with your property manager that you're paying as a contractor, but you never know when things can change. And that person doesn't owe you anything. You don't owe them anything. And if telling them when to show up in the office, they have a set schedule of Monday through Friday from 8 to blah, blah, blah. That sounds like an employee. The other nice thing about having employees is you can set clear expectations and guidelines and for them to follow. And if they don't, then you have more grounds for termination too. And there's no issues.
Yeah, but that's where I get real frustrated is like, then they don't do their job. Then I fire this individual, and then this individual starts collecting unemployment. What? Well, I take all the risk.
That's why you do. But who else takes them? We're in business for a reason.
I know. I just get frustrated.
Yeah. But that's why all employers pay into that unemployment.
Right. And there's some people that genuinely need unemployment, right? I mean, this whole
let me just say also, with COVID and everything the last year, I have seen an absurd amount of fraudulent unemployment claims. I got some from my business.
What do you mean?
Clients have had some, meaning I get a notice saying, hey, this person has filed unemployment, and they were never an employee, never a record of them. So because of COVID and everyone was filing for unemployment, the fraud numbers just increased. So and my point to this is check your mailbox because you only have X amount of days to respond to that notice.
Okay.
And if you don't respond and the state is like, oh, okay, well, we're going to proceed with collecting our unemployment tax on this.
Okay. I mean, that's a very good, hey, you're a pretty good accountant. That's a pretty good tip. I got something randomly fraudulent just like 30 minutes ago. I checked my email and a credit card process went through. I don't recognize the last 4 digits. I recognize the software, but I canceled that software. Mm-hmm. I thought it was very interesting how I got this email that said, your service is canceled. Here's your refund. Here's your 4 digits of your credit card number, but I don't recognize that number. It was very interesting. And I have to dig into it, actually.
Yeah.
All right. What other words of wisdom? Well, this is such a drab subject. Employees versus contractors.
It's not sexy.
No. What else? What other tips? So as a real estate investor, we need to really do our due diligence when hiring someone, making sure that.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to say is, because this comes up to, it's okay, they don't have a social.
They're illegal, is what you're trying to tell me?
Yeah.
Okay.
So your due diligence is still collecting that document, that W-9.
Yeah, I've heard so many weird things. Like, what if the social security number doesn't file? What doesn't match? Does why I'm still responsible?
And we get those every year. Those are called B notices from the IRS, and that says, "Hey, we got this 1099. Good job filling that out, but this name does not match this social." So sometimes it could just be a clerical error, last name, they didn't add a junior or whatever. So if you're still using that contractor, you need to go back and say, "Hey, I need a correct W-9 from you." If they don't provide that, then you have to withhold 28% tax from their pay. And
if they're still working.
If they're still working.
If you get this notice B. Interesting.
Well, I do that even if they don't want to give me a W-9. I wouldn't even work with them or say, okay, well, I have to withhold 28% and submit that to the IRS. I mean,
yeah,
I get that a lot of people are trying to save a few bucks, but there's a lot of reliable contractors.
What happens to the real estate investor or the business owner that doesn't, like, they didn't get a W-9, and did they pay the tax at the end of the year for that amount of money? How does that work as a tax accountant?
They'll still, so the correct thing to do would be to still file a 1099 on that person. Don't put in their information. You're probably going to get a notice. You could be penalized for filing an incomplete 1099.
Well, is that a fee?
Yeah, like $50.
Damn.
But if the IRS, there's also penalties if you knowingly do not file 1099s too. Those are things that would come up like at an audit. But that's why I said, if you're still using that contractor, your job is to withhold that 28%, and then you remit that to the IRS.
So the holy grail here is make sure you have a 1099 that's viable. And if you file it that year, it comes back, doesn't come back, you're good to go.
Viable.
Yeah. But other than that, you could really get yourself into a tiffy with someone.
Yeah, and when your accountant does your tax return too, there's a question on there that says, were they supposed to file any 1099s? And you say yes. The accountant says yes or no. And then it says, did they file them?
Yes or no.
Yes or no. Right.
So this is like a handicap form. I mean, like, you can't, like, they're just verifying, even if you read the document, what's going on here, like, to protect the IRS from suing. I mean, we
want to make sure that everyone's recording income. They go back and match those 1099s. And that's the other step is, okay, you got a 1099, you didn't record the income. That's a problem. So it all works. It all falls
the government takes
eventually.
Money from you. The government,
they just take a long time to do it.
The government takes their money regardless, or they're going to record it that it's owed by someone, somewhere, somehow. La-di-da-di-da. All right, so we're pretty much done with this.
Was that exciting?
Yeah, that was. I'm burned out, tired, and whatever. But anyway, I appreciate you taking the hard questions, and many more questions to come. Thank you for your time, Rose.
All right, bye.